During the wagon's brake replacement video, I noticed the brake fluid was quite dirty. Now is as good a time as any to perform a brake flush. A dealership or independent shop will use a specific brake flush machine that uses pressure and vacuum to flush the fluid. I am neither of those, but can get a similar effect with this MIDI-vac kit, using the inline reservoir and some tubing. This will allow me to do a complete brake flush without the need for a second person. Let's start by draining the brake reservoir. The less of the dirty brake fluid that has to be pulled through the lines, the better. Brake fluid should be a clearish yellow color, not greenish brown. Once all the fluid is sucked out, fill the reservoir with fresh brake fluid. As each caliper is flushed, check the reservoir and add fluid as needed. The front brake caliper bleed screw is on the top side of the caliper. Remove the dust cap from the screw. Connect the hose to the screw fitting. An 11mm wrench is used to loosen the screw. At this point, gravity bleeding is an option. A slow one. Speed. I am speed. Use the MIDI-vac to pull a vacuum on the brake caliper. The fluid will flow through the tube and get caught in the inline reservoir. Air bubbles in the brake system is bad. Too much air can cause a spongy brake pedal feel, since air compresses and fluid does not. The older the brake fluid, the more likely air bubbles can form. I am genuinely surprised at the amount of bubbles coming out at the moment. The brake pedal has not been feeling spongy. I think the hose is not quite sealing against the fitting on the caliper. Once the fluid in the tube turns the color of the new fluid in the reservoir, and the air bubbles have stopped, it's time to close the system and top off the reservoir level. The rear brakes bleed just the same as the front, but the bleed screw is harder to reach. A narrow, closed-end, 11mm box wrench does the job well. There are two schools of thought on where to start bleeding from. One is to start at the caliper closest to the reservoir, and the other is to start at the caliper furthest from the reservoir. I have done both in the past and not felt any noticeable difference between the two methods. Once every caliper has been bled, do a final check on the reservoir level, then take a test drive. If the pedal feels spongy, the brakes need to be bled again. This is Rooster. Coming up with all these puns is really breaking my brain.